I know Disney movies are all the rage these days, but let's forget about Ariel, Jasmine, and Belle. Disney princesses may have an appeal to us, but history has a lot more to offer when it comes to princesses who are the definition of badass. These are not your typical damsels in distress that get abducted by dragons and kept in stone castles. No, these are women who have either fought in wars or have gained their title by keeping 10 steps ahead of their male counterparts. Of course, it does help a little if you're, related to Genghis Khan or are a Spartan. Buckle up and sharpen your swords because we're gonna count down the 10 most badass princesses in history. Number 10, Raka of Zamora, one of the 5 children of Ferdinand the Great of Spain. Raka was destined for greatness as she was able to fend off an advancing army intent on taking her city. She and her siblings were each given lands to which they can rule as their own city-states in peace. Of course, if there is anything that history has shown us is that he or she who has the largest amount of land gains control of a territory or country. And this was the case with the eldest of Ferdinand's children, Sancho. Deciding that he wanted all the lands to himself, Sancho effectively overthrew each of his siblings, leaving Urraca last. When Sancho reached the city-state of Zamora, his little sister was more than prepared, and Sancho's armies were not even able to enter Zamora's walls. In a final attempt to topple Urraca, Sancho surrounded Zamora to prevent anyone from coming in or out, hoping to starve its citizens and Urraca herself. The princess, however, was not deterred by Sancho and set up a plan to assassinate her brother, which was carried out successfully, thus taking down the family bully. Number 9, Tomoya Golden. While she was not considered a princess or of royal birth, Tomoya Golden deserves a spot on this list because being a female samurai is pretty much the equivalent of being a kick-butt warrior princess. The life of Tomoya Golden is one of the few to have been ever recorded of a woman who rode to war. While female samurais were not completely uncommon in Japan, they are quite few, and Tomoya was one who has exhibited an extraordinary amount of talent in martial arts, archery, and swordsmanship. Her skills therefore earned her a spot as one of history's most respected and iconic warriors, the samurai. Her greatest recorded accomplishment was when she fought side by side with her husband in the Genpei Wars. As records of her life show, Tomoya was able to single-handedly kill off a group of advancing soldiers and decapitating their leader as he attempted to dismount her from her horse. While historical records about her were kept as accurate as possible, her later years became clouded in obscurity. One account has it that after the Genpei War, Tomoya retired her sword and entered a monastery where she lived out the rest of her life. In another story, because her husband did not survive the war, it was believed that Tomoya took her life through the ancient ritual of seppuku. Number 8, Olga of Kiev. She embodies the age-old saying, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." Olga of Kiev lived a peaceful and prosperous life in the Ukraine around the 10th century until her husband Igor was brutally murdered by invading Drevlians. Believing that Olga was of weak stock because of her gender, the Drevlians forced her to marry one of their prince, which she did consent to. Still scorned by the killing of her husband, Olga tricked and led a group of Drevlians to a pit which was dug overnight and buried them alive. She continued her systematic purge of the Drevlians and lured their most elite and influential citizens to bathhouses which she set on fire. And during her husband's funeral, she managed to get 5,000 Drevlians drunk and essentially had them wiped out. As a final stroke to her vengeance, she returned all the pigeons that were offered to her as a sign of peace by the Drevlians, but not before powdering their feathers with bits of sulfur that later on burned their town to ashes. Number 7, Nanny of the Maroons. On the shores of Jamaica in the 18th century, escaped slaves built communities in order to protect themselves from the British. With the help of a member of the Ghanaian royal family named Nanny, they were able to fend off the British effectively. Coming to the shores of Jamaica on her own free will, Nanny helped the escaped African slaves called Maroons set up a lookout system across the entire island that would communicate through telegraph should British ships be spotted and prepared to defend their community. Among many other systems she put in place, Nanny was even able to develop a potent herbal mixture that knocked their enemies out cold by its fumes alone. Celebrated as a hero, her face can be found printed on Jamaican $500 bills, as well as having her name on several schools, buildings, and institutions around the island country. Number 6, Lydia O Kalani. She was the last reigning monarch and queen of Hawaii, spending her life on the throne protecting the native people of the islands and fiercely campaigning against the annexation of the United States. Lydia O Kalani used brains and diplomacy and avoided violence as a means to maintain sovereignty and independence. In one move, she attempted to pass an amended constitution which would restore power to the native people of Hawaii, as well as grant her more political power in order to fend off any U.S. involvement in their affairs. Unfortunately, in 1898, she was forced off the throne and Hawaii Hawaii was finally claimed by the US. During her lifetime, she advocated for peaceful resistance and resolutions to conflict, and despite losing her country to the Americans, she continued to preserve Hawaiian identity by curating all things related to its people and culture. And not a lot of us may know this, but among her various contributions to Hawaiian culture was a song that she composed called Aloha Oi. Number 5. Zhao Pingyang. Princess Pingyang lived in the 7th century when the Sui dynasty was on the verge of crumbling. Originally, she was not of any kind of royal descent, being only a daughter of a governor. However, in this turbulent time, her father saw an opportunity to topple the Sui dynasty through rebellion. As her father amassed a force to take on the emperor, she warned Pingyang and her husband to leave their home, which was a stone throw away from the emperor's palace, because they would soon be labeled as enemies of the state and will likely be executed on sight. Pingyang urged her husband to leave town first to join the rebel army. On the way to meet her husband and her father, Pingyang sold her family's estate and used the money to raise an army to help bring down the Sui Empire. Eventually, she began to lead an army of 700,000 soldiers from one victory to the next, and she was so feared that the emperor amassed a special force just to kill her. But unfortunately for the Sui forces, Pingyang and her army were able to defeat them, destroying the emperor's hopes of riddling the rebellion of their female leader. The Sui dynasty was later on toppled, and it was replaced by the Tang dynasty, with Pingyang's father as the country's new emperor. In honor of her daughter's victory and contributions to the successful rebellion, the emperor commemorated her with a military parade and bestowed her with the title of Zhao, and she was crowned as princess of the Tang dynasty when she was only 20 years old. Number 4. Gemara. At the height of the Roman Empire, when they marched from one country to the next, conquering, pillaging, and abducting women, they came across a tribe of people that was on their list of subjugating next. As part of bringing the tribe to their knees, the Romans abducted a woman named Gemara, who was incidentally the wife of the chief. While she had to endure a number of abuses at the hands of the Romans, one centurion promised Gemara that she would be returned to her tribe if a ransom in gold would be paid in her exchange. Eventually, the tribe agrees to pay her ransom and she was returned. While the centurion was busy counting the gold, Gemara ordered her rescuers to behead him, and they did. And then she took the head of the centurion and carried it like a trophy as she walked back home. And when she saw her husband, the chief, she throws the centurion's head at his feet and declares, "Only one man who has lain with me shall remain alive." Number 3. Isabella of France. Called the she-wolf of France, Isabella had it hard from the beginning when she was married to her presumably homosexual husband, Edward. It was said that in order to keep her from losing power, she had to also build an alliance with Edward's lover. But it was when Edward found a new lover that Isabella's life went completely upside down. During a failed skirmish in Scotland after the death of William Wallace, Edward suddenly decided to flee and abandon Isabella and her entourage. Before they were captured by the advancing Scottish army, Isabella, her entourage, and a few knights that stayed with her managed to steal some boats in order to escape back to England. Unfortunately, Isabella did not receive a warm welcome back home. Her lands and her many estates were confiscated, and her household staff were even thrown in prison. To add more salt to the wound, her children were sold off to her political enemies. Sensing that trouble was closing in on her, Isabella regrouped in her home country of France and raised an army and returned to England to overthrow Edward and his new lover Hugh. She was later on joined by multiple factions during her campaign who were equally fed up with Edward. Seeing that they were close to being cornered, Edward and Hugh fled but were caught. Hugh's father, who was Edward's advisor and Isabella's fiercest political enemy, was also captured and sentenced to be dragged by a horse, hanged, and decapitated. Hugh suffered a much harsher fate. Like his father, he was dragged by a horse, hanged until he was mostly dead, and then disemboweled and decapitated. After all that, his head was put on a spike and displayed at the London Bridge. But due to Edward's existing political influence and allies outside of England, Isabella had no choice but to put him behind bars where, according to historians, he accidentally died. Number 2. Kutu Yun. Unlike Xena, she was the real warrior princess, and that title was well deserved. After all, what title could you be given if you were the great-great-granddaughter of Genghis Khan and your family ruled a third of the globe for centuries? Known for her independent spirit, Kutu Yun was a Mongolian royalty whose reputation preceded her wherever she went. Part of her life was even chronicled by Marco Polo himself, where he took note of her incredible abilities in wrestling among many other impressive skills. Her political ambitions were fueled by her father, from whom she learned the fierce military strategies of the Mongol army. Naturally, her father wanted her to marry and bear children to carry on the legacy of her bloodline, but not wanting to be married off to anyone, Kutu Yun issued a challenge to anyone wishing to court her, not to see who can bring her the freshest flowers or the biggest diamonds. If you wanted to win her love, you would have to beat her in wrestling. Another condition was that if a man lost to her challenge, he would have to give her a horse. And check this out, she ended up with 10 3,000 horses before she finally consented to be wed. Number 1. Rani Lakshmi Bai. Now, before you ask why Kutuyun did not make it to number 1 after, beating 10,000 men in wrestling, hear me out on this and you'll understand why Rani Lakshmi Bai landed the top spot in this video. Born in 1835 in India, Lakshmi Bai was the daughter of one of India's prime minister's aides, which gave her the opportunity to grow up in a royal setting. Not content to just sit around and learning needlework and the tasks that were usually designated to women during that time, Lakshmi Bai spent a great deal of her youth learning how to use a sword, mastering archery, and wielding guns. Married to a prince at the age of 12, Lakshmi Bai's road to power was being paved for her. Soon enough, her husband became Raja and they adopted a son to complete their family. Unfortunately, her husband died, and a certain Lord Ramsay cited a legislation called the Doctrine of Lapse to justify seizing her family's lands, and further stated that, according to the British government, who was occupying India at the time, Lakshmi Bai and her son were not of royal descent and therefore was forced out of the throne. After emotionally and mentally recovering from the trauma dealt to her by the British Empire, she began gathering an army of men and women to rebel. Taking on the mantle of their leader, she led her army of rebels head-on against British soldiers with her adopted son strapped to her back. Yeah, that's right. Now, if that isn't the most badass thing in history, I don't know what is. Labeled by her enemies as the most dangerous of all rebel leaders, Rani Lakshmi Bai was eventually killed at the Battle of Gwalior while charging and firing at the man who had shot her in the back. So there you go, guys, and I wanted to do this video because, like I said, there's a lot of talk about Disney princesses and how awesome they are, like Jasmine falling for a commoner or Belle falling in love with a water buffalo and eventually changing him to a prince. I just wanted to do a video about the real life awesome princesses in history. So hope you liked it. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you later.